What does your actual physical and mental health feel like to you? And then, like you said, if the job site, if your school is feeling crazy, then likely there's an opportunity to make some adjustments in some of your habits around your physical and mental self-care process.
So Nate, right before we hit record, you said something really interesting. The beginning of the school year, right when kids are getting back to school, we have our studio schedules set. This is a time where people typically, their schedule either falls apart or at the very least it changes. You'd said some things to me earlier in the summer, and there have been some changes in even the way that we were doing the podcast based on some things going on in your life. I'm not going to steal your thunder, but there's some thoughts that are just top of mind. For me, just because my family personally has been touched by some loss this summer, and it brings to mind questions of mortality and stuff like that. And I think this is a good time to have an episode about the things that we're doing to take care of ourselves, not only physically but also mentally, emotionally. The life of a small business owner is very different than the life of someone who has what I'll call a traditional job. And depending on our personality makeup, depending on the way we're built, people handle the stresses of that, the lack of structure of that in very, very different ways. And I thought this is a good topic to get into. This isn't talked about much in our circles.
No,
nope. And I think it's an important one. Yeah. So welcome back to the podcast, everyone. I'm Daniel. This is Nate. And this is the 7-Figure Music School podcast, where we talk about the things that make it possible to have a fun, mission-driven business. And we're here on episode. We're getting closer to 100 every single week, Nate.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. It's a lot of fun. But let's jump into this and talk about what kind of led me to start thinking about the topic of health and wellness personally. And then I'd love to jump in because, Nate, I know you have a lot of practices around this yourself as well. But when I was 33, so getting closer to a decade ago now, I was hanging out with a group of people that I spent a lot of time with, mentors, people that I was really close to. And there was an older guy in this group. He's about 20. At the time, he's still 20 years older than me. But at the time, he was in his early 50s. And it was the dead of winter. And he was wearing a jogging outfit. It was kind of out of place for the dress code of what we were doing at the time. It was just a bunch of guys meeting together to just be guys, And I comment on his outfit. And I was like, "You're not going running in this." It was like middle of January, very cold in Indiana. There was snow on the ground. It was slushy. It was gross. And he said, "Oh yeah." And I said, "Why? Why are you doing this?" And he said, and he could have come back with a cute little answer or something. But this guy, being who he was dead serious. He says, "Daniel, when a guy turns 35, if he doesn't do anything to intervene, slowly but surely, all the muscle in his leg will turn to fat." And I don't want that to happen to me.
Right.
And, I was 33 at the time and had not really experienced anything in the way of any major health thing. When you're young, you don't think about that stuff.
No,
unless you're... Yeah, exactly. And I just... That made such an impact on me. And I started getting much more serious about my health at that time. And so I loved that someone cared enough to talk to me about that. And it kind of gave me a wake-up call and put me on this path that's kind of led me to where I'm at now. And I'm hoping in some ways that this episode can do that. Have you had a moment like that, Nate? Have you had a moment where you had this wake-up call, or you changed something, or you began prioritizing this area of your life more than you had before?
I definitely, I have, Daniel, as I've shared with you, I have a congenital heart issue. So I was born with about 4 different things that were busted in my heart. And so I had open heart surgery when I was 4. And for me, the wake up call came when I was 40. How old was I? About 40. 45-ish, 44, because after that initial surgery, which was back in 1973-ish, I was told that I was all fixed, that everything was fine, and I could just be like any other kid and just live my life. And my mom said the same thing to me, growing up. And so, of course, we take that as gospel, and we just assume that's what's happening. And then there was a moment back in 2014 where I went in for a routine checkup, and I actually had a cardiac MRI, which is a much longer version of an MRI for those of you who have unfortunately ever had to do that. Anywho, basically this cardiologist who I had never met before looked at my chart and was like, Nate, you need to have open heart surgery like right now, like immediately. We need to operate. And that was back, like I said, around 2014, late 2014 into 2015.
Yeah.
And I just was shocked. I was like, so that I had always been active, right, Daniel? I'd always been someone, like, I think as musicians, we're by definition active because we're using our body, and you have to have like really high levels of body awareness to be a musician. And we're both pianists, but I never really, I didn't really think about both physical and mental health as seriously as I did after that. And it's literally one of my top priorities, which we'll get into in terms of what I think about how I organize my day and my year now. So
yeah,
it was a heck of a wake-up call.
Yeah. So we're going to get into this. I hope this encourages dialogue. Obviously, we can't speak to you through the podcast or the YouTube videos. But, I do hope that this episode maybe causes people to pause for a little bit and think, because we're going to get into, our personal journey. But more importantly, I think the things that you can take from that to apply, maybe questions you can ask yourself, things to think about. And we're going to do that right after we talk a little bit about the sponsors of this podcast, which are our favorite, Big Music Games and GroupLessons.com. So just a brief note about GroupLessons.com. I've been talking to some folks who've heard some of our previous episodes and have reached out to me about the Piano Express group piano system, GroupLessons.com. And something I've heard come up over and over again is people just doubting that parents in their studio would accept a group piano system. And that has been actually their main trepidation. They're concerned about starting a system like that. They really want to, but they're like, I just don't think parents in our area will accept that. Well, I have a word for you. And that is, they absolutely will. And I will tell you why. Because I've helped 500 plus studios convert. And almost all of those studios were absolutely convinced that no one in their studio would accept it. And what I did was I put them through a training on how to introduce the program to parents, how to normalize it for them, how to get them excited about it so that they're really, really on board. So if you've been listening to this podcast, you thought, man, I'd really like to do that, but I just don't know. I don't know if I want to rock the boat. It's too risky. Come on in. The water's fine, because we have helped a ton of studios get through those same exact fears, and they've come out the other side and been very, very happy about it. You can learn more about this at GroupLessons.com, all the advantages that can bring to you. One of the main ones being that GroupLessons.com Piano Express system is one of the very, very, very few group systems in the world where a student can enter and exit a class at any time, making scheduling and billing for you really, really easy. A seamless transition will result as you use it. So that's GroupLessons.com. But we'd be remiss not to talk a little bit about Big Music Games. So, Nate, tell us a little bit about that.
Daniel, before I go there, let me just say that I was literally on a call this morning with the school owner who uses Piano Express. And this is a quote. You'll love this. She said, when a parent calls about piano lessons, I can have them enrolled in Piano Express and with an under 24 hours. And I just thought you'd dig that. And it's super impressive. Big Music Games. Yeah, it's the foundation of everything we do at Brooklyn Music Factory. And it's been available to teachers in schools around the world now for a few years. And I've set up a site just for our listeners, bigmusicgames.com/7FMS. That's the number 7FMS. And essentially, it's just a whole series of music, ear training, and theory games meant for your students that are ages 4 to 9, though we have tons of students that are teens that are also playing them. There are literally hundreds of games that cover melody, harmony, rhythm, and songwriting. We're a songwriting program. So basically, we have for years been revising and refining how we build more and more fun into the lesson architecture and into lesson planning and into the experience for the student. So bigmusicgames.com is where you can go, and you can play games today. It's absolutely free to get started. So there it is. Anyways, if you want to gamify your lessons, that's it. Daniel, where do you want to start with our physical and mental health app? Because I would love to get deep into this. It's one of my favorite topics. Every morning I wake up and ensure that I've reviewed what I'm going to do today to take care of those two things.
I do have a really, I feel like an important thought. And I think this is the way that I would frame this for anyone. Like if someone just said, hey, let's go out for coffee, let's just talk about life. And if this topic got brought up, this is what I would say first. And that is that so often when I talk to school owners about what I'd consider to be the most important aspects of their life, it's couched in this language of, how do I fit it in?
Right.
And I'm going to actually make the suggestion that you need to fit work into your life, not your life into work. Which again, I think this is a unique message that has to be said to small business owners, because the fences in our lives are very, very movable. And we have a lot of autonomy, and we have a lot of choices that we have to make every day. And unless we have fences or boundaries or whatever you want to call it, if we don't have those around our time, it's very easy to get into this mindset of, well, how do I fit this thing in here? And so what I would say is that there are some cornerstone or pillar things in my life that I start with these, and then everything else has to fit around them.
Love it.
Again, you could get this advice from a lot of different people. You go to YouTube right now and look up David Goggins or Jeff Nippard or a lot of people who their whole shtick is exercise or things like that. This is just my contribution to it because I've lived this life. I started teaching in 2004, and I had to think about these things in the context of our industry. And I know there's a lot of people that, that it's more helpful when they hear it from someone who's gone through it, like they will for me and you today. Yep. And so here are some of those pillars I think are really important. I center, or I build my week around a couple core things. There is just some personal time I'm going to take every single day to do things that are really, really important to me. And we'll get into those a little bit later. Some of those a little bit later. So I will just have I'll just block out time for myself to do important habits, such as journaling, or just, some people call it meditation. I think of it as sitting in silence and just letting myself live, just exist, not for any reason, not to play a game, not to call someone, not to talk to a friend, not to go to a movie, not to do work, not to think. It's my little vacation. I can do whatever I want with it. I can do whatever I can do whatever I want with my time. But at this point, I'm just existing. And I think it was Rene Descartes. He said something like, I'm botching the quote, but something to the effect of, the problem is that most people can't sit quietly alone in a room. And just that they can't, that they don't have this, they're uncomfortable, they're made uncomfortable by it. I don't want to belabor this point too much because I think we're going to get into this a little bit later, but let me just get through these pillars. So I have that. I definitely have family time. I have the time that I go to the gym. Right now I'm going 4 days a week. And then I have dedicated goof off time. And that's literally what it is on my calendar. And I'm not going to belabor this point. In past episodes, I have talked about how I do schedule my weeks out in advance on Sunday night. So I'm pretty clear on how my time usage is going to be that week. And I do schedule in all of these things. And then everything else, all the work stuff has to fit in between these these pillars, these important things, the non-negotiables.
Right.
If I had a different job 10 years from now, I would still be doing these things. The job doesn't matter, but my life does. So that's kind of how, so this is what Stephen Covey calls the big rocks principle. If you put a bunch of sand in a jar and then you try to fit a big rock in the jar, it will not happen. You have to put the big rocks in first, and then you fill in the sand around it. And for me, those big rocks, the non-negotiables, is that family time, that personal time, workout time, like that sort of thing. I'm curious, Nate, just speaking only on kind of this topic, like either maybe you have some thoughts on it or maybe you have different big rocks than me. I'm curious.
A lot of the big rocks overlap with yours. I love what you said. And what's interesting is that this year, let me share a couple of areas that might be unique and areas that I might need to work on. I literally wrote in my annual goals this year to basically have more fun. And I kind of freaking love that you have like goof off time. That's actually a big rock, dude. I think that was like a little moment for me of like, wait a minute. I don't specifically book that. A couple of areas, a couple of additions for me. I book another big rock for me is some of my spiritual time. So like I have a Thursday night class and a Saturday morning class. I don't miss those. Like I just don't miss those. And in fact, I was talking with someone today, another school owner, and I was saying like even when a teacher calls in sick and I might be the number one sub or the fix to the problem, I still don't adjust. Back to your comment, like, right, work has to fit into the life. So that spiritual piece is really important for me. I go to those classes. You were talking about sitting in silence. I have a morning meditation I do that's right now 30 minutes each morning, and I desperately try to not let anything move that. A couple of other pieces for me, Jessica and I are empty nesters right now, so the relationship has shifted quite a bit. So right now I put those rocks in around her. Like it's just like, for anyone listening who's an empty nester, it's like you're sort of getting to know one another again. So that's a big rock for me, is like just developing my relationship with her in this new phase of our life. And so I schedule that in every week. And then the last piece is I do like a morning walk that I consider different than my exercise. And that might be sort of analogous to your sitting in silence. I wrote next to sitting in silence, like margin. Like I took an hour-long walk this morning, and that's just a time where I'm not trying to accomplish anything. It's not like I'm strategizing my day or anything. It's just like you said, just the ability. I'm just moving and breathing, and Lulu, my dog, comes with me. So maybe dog walking. That might be a big rock. But anyways, no, I view it as something important. So that's it. Otherwise, they're overlapping with you. I hit the gym. I have family time. I have a couple of other routines I do, which we'll get into later. But they all fall into those, so it's nice. Yeah,
I love that. I know it feels like we just started this episode, but I'm going to say that probably the rest of this episode for me is just maybe sharing things that I've done personally over the years, recommendations I have. I know that for me, being a big consumer of podcasts and YouTube videos, I do put a lot of time in my life into that. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff that I've tried over the years. There's a lot of value I've gotten in listening to someone else giving recommendations that really work for them. I kind of want to pay that forward. There's things I think that have been really helpful for me that I want to share here, and I think the same is probably true for you. I probably have some personal accounts that I'll get into, but mostly, I just want to be helpful to those listening with some very specific recommendations.
I love that.
So first off, I want to start maybe with like mental health. That is a hot button issue. That is also a big umbrella term. I'm just going to keep it really simple and say that over the years, I've had some interesting experiences. I actually had a recital in 2014 that I got so stressed out over that I actually had a massive panic attack a couple hours after the recital was over. And it was so bad that I ended up going to the hospital. What was so interesting about this was that once your body does it, it creates a pathway for it to continue to do it.
Mm.
And that's why I would have them just at random times. And they weren't nearly as bad as the first one. But during the most of 2014, I actually was going around being scared of my own body. That's a year I very clearly remember, because it just could happen at any random time until I figured out how to control it. And what was interesting was once I learned how to control it physically, once I had like this trigger thing that would make it go away, I stopped being afraid of it, and then they went away.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was very scary for me. And so that's kind of like a mental health thing. But what I will tell you is probably the greatest thing for just the average low-level anxiety that we can all experience on a day-to-day basis. For me, the biggest controller of that is just the planning that I do and how much thought I put into what I'm going to be doing each day. So I'm not going to belabor this point. I keep 2 lists, one for work, as to everything I'm going to do this week in order, and I keep a personal list of everything I need to do. These lists never get completed. Every week, things get added to them. I will never complete these lists. It's okay, because once a week, I reorder them and make sure the most important stuff is at the top. So when I sit down for either business list time or personal list time, that is the only time I think about the things on those lists. I sit down, I look at the next thing, I do it until it's done, and then if I still have time left in the time I blocked out, I go to the next thing, and then the next thing, and the next thing. And then, like for instance today, I stopped working at 11:30 to eat lunch. I went and made food for myself. I goofed off. I didn't think about work. And then when it was over, I came back and I kept working on the list. And when I get done with work tonight, I'll work on my personal side of the list. I'll work on my personal list for a little while. And when I get done with that, I'll stop thinking about it. And I will say that a lot of people, including team members who know me, they make kind of like, Daniel, how do you read all this stuff, watch all this stuff, know all this stuff? Like, how do you have time to do that? And just like, these lists, man, I feel like I'm getting to live a couple people's lives in the course of 1 year just because everything is so efficiently planned. And then I just don't have a lot of anxiety around the things that I have to do, even though there's like big stuff in the line and I've got team to pay and, bills to pay myself, blah, blah, blah. Like, I just don't experience a lot of anxiety because for me, keeping that just keeps it a very, very, very low level for me.
Yeah.
I'm curious around your mental health stuff, Nate, or maybe you had something different to say.
I just wanted to add to that because I remember when you shared with your system, and I wanted to highlight one thing you said, which is that you reprioritize it every week.
Every Sunday, yeah.
Yeah, every Sunday. And you just create a list and you say, hey, this is to my best guess right now is that this is what's most important to do first this week. And you do it.
Yeah.
But you give yourself an opportunity next week. So that resonates with me. Yeah, for the mental health piece for me has been primarily around, I sort of wrote down here 3 things. One, as an adult, sort of being diagnosed with ADHD and realizing like, it's not just like an artist creative thing. Like there's actually a diagnosis for this, dude. And that's why you're always setting, for example, I'm a huge proponent of the Pomodoro timer. Like I'm working on writing a book right now, Daniel, and I have 3 25-minute writing sessions later today, and I have to use timers. Literally, when I'm having lunch, I try to sit and only eat, and I set a timer for 10 minutes because I'm like, come on, dude, you can just eat for 10 minutes and do nothing else. Anyways, so mental health for me was one, just sort of like this diagnosed thing and being like, okay, well, this is why sometimes I feel scattered. This is why I'm so interested and intrigued in your like list system, right? This is why it's hard for me to do the weekly review every week because I get distracted quickly. But also why I try to double down on those things that give me a sense of, like you said, a sense of control, lock booking the schedule. I'm a huge proponent of that. By the way, I call it my big 3, like what are the 3 things I'm going to accomplish this week? And then I have it in a gray color on my Google Cal, and I just put it in the calendar, and I try to give myself ideally up to 3 hours a day that I can work on those. But usually, like today, it's 1.5 hours. So I don't judge myself too much on the length, but I put those things in there. The second piece around mental health that I jotted down is like, for me, it's peace of mind. Like, I want to be able to work, Daniel, whether it's like prepping a podcast episode that we're going to do or having to address, a building issue at the music school, like our HVAC just went out today, having to address that. And it's 96 degrees there or whatever it is. I'm not there right now, but I'm, working on it from afar. So whatever the issue is, I want to be able to work on it with a peaceful mind. That's it. That's my criteria for me personally in mental health. I do not want to get worked up. I don't want to get agitated over it. And that's how I define it. And so, things like we were talking about it before, like that quiet time, the sitting still, the meditation, the setting an intention of working peacefully through the day, that's essential to my mental health. Otherwise, we all know, our listeners all know how quickly it is to get derailed and feel super agitated over something. And then the last piece is anger. Like I work really closely to watch whenever I do feel angry. And then I say, to me personally, it's not a useful emotion. So I just am constantly aware of that. And I'll, like you said about around journaling and things like that, a lot of my journaling is around just being hyper aware of it. It's not like I have an anger management problem at all or anything like that. It's more like I don't want it to show up anywhere, whether someone's cutting me off on the road or a tax bill comes due from 2019 that I just got in the mail. Like, I don't want to feel it in any of those situations because I don't think it's a useful emotion for me. So in terms of mental health, those are my three. That's how I operate in that world.
I think before I move on, I'll just put a few recommendations out there, things that were helpful for me. Early in his run of podcast episodes, Tim Ferriss had a number of people on that made a huge impact to me. This is back 2014 to 2016. And there were recommendations I got from that podcast. And I would maybe have people check out Tara Brach, his episodes with Tara Brach. Those were really helpful. She's kind of someone who specializes in meditation, as well as, of course, I'm forgetting his last name now, Sam Harris. I kept wanting to say Sam Altman, who started Y Combinator. Sam Harris has a book called Waking Up, and it's non-religious meditation and just the neurological benefits of it. Naval Ravikant did some episodes on that, and there was a video years ago that is no longer available where he talks for 11 minutes about his meditation practice. That was really helpful for me. I actually, before they privated the video, I actually got the link. So I'll probably put that in the show notes because that video is no longer available unless you have the direct link. I'm going to put that in the show notes, and I do have the direct link. And then also, I love the app called Oak. It is a meditation app. It's my favorite one. I think a much more popular one is Headspace or Calm. Those are great, but I really like Oak. I don't know why. I just do. It was made by Kevin Rose, who founded Dig, which was a precursor to Reddit. And Kevin Rose is Tim Ferriss's probably best friend. This was an app that he designed. He is already super rich. He made no money off this app. I think he donated all the proceeds or whatever. He just really wanted an app that wasn't as busy as some of these other apps that are more popular, like Calm or Headspace.
Yeah.
Anyway, those are the recommendations there. I think I want to jump maybe now into health. Nate, is that cool? Okay.
Love it.
Again, my goal here is to just talk through and make some recommendations and talk about how I kind of got where I am. But I married a health nut. And she was much more concerned about the food we were eating. And so pretty much from that time, 2006, when we met, I've eaten very, very healthy for the most part. Doesn't mean I don't have pizza night. Doesn't mean that I don't eat fast food sometimes. But in general, the kinds of food we keep around the house are, like locally sourced or organic, stuff like that. I would say that just as in my time with with food, I track as well. So especially when I have been in a place where I'm trying to be really conscious of what I'm eating, I do track calories and macronutrients and things like that. Even this year with my weightlifting, I was able to add a lot of weight to what I did just by tracking my protein better. I had a vague assumption of how much I was taking in, but then once I started tracking it, I realized I was vastly under eating protein versus what I should be. And I ended up being able to lift a lot more simply by prioritizing protein calories over fat and carb calories. So I keep track of all that stuff.
Do you use an app to track? Do you use an app to track that at all that you'd recommend?
There are a lot that do it, like MyFitnessPal. I just happen to use the one that a gym that I was going to a while ago. I don't go to it anymore. They just had us use an app called Lose It.
Got it.
You know, I'm almost 6'2", and I have been since I was 14 years old. I actually grew 10 inches in 1 year between 13 and 14.
Man.
So I was about 6'1" when I was 14, and I grew another like half inch to inch over the next decade. And it made for very awkward teen years. Anyway,
right.
When I was 14, I weighed 135 pounds at 6'1". I always had a very fast metabolism. I was the skinny guy, so to speak.
Yeah, ditto. I don't
suffer. Yeah, I don't suffer from that problem anymore. I'm kind of, fighting the other end now. But the point being just that it became more of a thought for me as I went in my 30s, especially with some stuff going on with my heart. Just wanted to be a little more conscious about that. So that's kind of the food and health side. I would recommend that people look into a couple things that stood out. I've experimented a lot in terms of diet over the years. I tried keto. I hated it. So there was a book I read that talked about how to lose weight rapidly or something. And it basically went, and I don't think this is sustainable, but there were literally times where I dropped 20 pounds in 6 weeks just eating this way, where you cycle between mostly carbs to mostly fat, and it shocks your body every time you do it. So you're like 5 days on mostly fat, no carbs, and then 3 days on mostly carbs, no fat. And then you just keep cycling through. And they say to keep this up for 4 to 8 weeks to get the effect. Your body just kind of gets shocked. And honestly, we ate tasty food during that time. It was really good. It isn't like a traditional diet where it's like, oh, just eat, paper and water. We were eating really nice stuff. We were having desserts on the fat days, that sort of thing. For the life of me, I can't remember the name of the book. If I remember, I'll put it in the show notes.
It's not like South Beach or anything like that.
It's not South Beach, no. But anyway, I just swear by this because every time I did it, I dropped tons of weight. And they say only do it for 4 to 8 weeks, not because it's dangerous, but just because it's kind of unsustainable. But being the nutcase that I am, I mostly sustained it for almost 18 months where I was eating this way, although I would cheat on holidays. But, unlike keto, this is a system you can cheat on. So those are kind of, again, some of the things that really stood out to me in terms of diet. I'll talk about exercise next, but is there anything diet-wise that really was meaningful to you?
Yeah, I'm actually going to take a different angle on the diet piece. Okay. I'm going to keep it super personal for a minute. So my younger daughter suffered from a really extremely hard chapter and an eating disorder when she was younger. And so what's fascinating is it completely changed our language around food. And obviously diet culture, et cetera. It became like we just had to remove it from our home culture, right? So there was no more talk around diet, but and we just simply use language like food is medicine, which is one of the really important, we practice some family-based therapy to bring her back to health, where we become the sort of food police and ensuring that she's eating, et cetera. Anyways, where does that lead in terms of just physical health and diet? Now, for me personally, really what I've found works, because we're not going to subscribe to any sort of diet. We're not even going to talk about it here. Instead, we've taken sort of very simple approaches like, for us, we've done things like, well, we're making sure that we're eating 3 meals. We're making sure that we're balancing and there's more vegetables than less vegetables, things like basic things like that. We're not treating it, calling it a diet, but we're ensuring that we're eating consistently. That was a thing, The other thing for Jess and I has been some sort of pretty simple things. Like, we know that if we drink alcohol like more than X number of days in any given week, it's just tough. It's hard mentally and physically. So we've done things like, we've taken a month off. We've done things where we'd only drink on a Friday or a Saturday. Sometimes it's harder in the summer. It's harder when we're with family or on holidays. So we'll do things where we you just have a glass of wine every other day and you've cut down 50%. So those are just a couple little hacks and then a little why behind why there's nothing in my Evernote around dieting, in terms of physical health. That's why we don't. But those are some of the ways that we talk about it under our roof. So,
okay. I remember the name of that book.
Oh, what is it? What do you got?
It's called The Alt Shift Diet.
Alt Shift.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. I will say this, maybe as a last thing, and that is just that I sometimes wonder if just the tracking is what helped versus it being some kind of magic thing. I don't think it's a magic bullet. I think it's just that I had to be tracking the number of carbs or fats that I was eating, and just that level of detail lent itself to being much more aware. And I think that's maybe the controlling factor in all this is awareness. Well, maybe let's go to the last one that I want to talk about, and that is just kind of like what has worked for me in terms of what I've done at the gym. So I had 3 phases in my adult life. One was phases. Yeah, I had 3 gym phases. Nice. One was a guy I knew who's a little bit older than me, kind of a mentor, father figure to me. He was an NCAA quarterback, and he turned me onto this book called The New Rules of Weightlifting when I was in my mid-20s. And I did that for about 5 years. And then when I had 5 or 6 years, and then when I had that panic attack year, I actually stopped going to the gym because I was taking it easy. And that actually, I think I wasn't even before that, to be honest. I think about it. It's been almost a decade ago. Then I had that wake up call with that friend. And then I started working out again, but I used something, and I actually still recommend this. It's called You Are Your Own Gym. It's a book.
Oh, dig it.
You are your own gym. And it's all body weight exercises. And I would do this 5 days a week. I did these 20-minute routines in my living room I'm not embarrassed maybe a little bit embarrassed to admit this. But back in the day, Gary Vaynerchuk used to release a daily video that was usually 10 to 20 minutes long. And so I would watch his daily video while I was doing that routine in my living room. Nice. While my wife was gone to work, my son was still very, very young. He was probably up, in his room doing something. But sometimes he would come down. I mostly wouldn't, because if you know Gary Vaynerchuk, you don't want a child in the room while you're watching a video from Gary Vaynerchuk. But anyway, the point is that it was kind of this fun little habit I had just to do that. And that content is not the kind of thing where you need to sit there and concentrate. It was just really fascinating to see what this really good, intense entrepreneur was doing with his life, and just kind of get a sense of that. Anyway, then the third phase was I just got to this point where I couldn't increase the challenge anymore. Like, I was already doing the advanced stuff on the You Are Your Own Gym book and app. And it's like, I can't, if you're just doing body weight exercises, you reach this natural limit as to what you can do. It was around that time that I thought, I've always wanted to do weights. And that this local gym opened where it wasn't a gym where you, check in, check out, do your own thing. The only way you could be a member there is if you were working with a trainer. So I actually got a trainer and paid, I think, I don't know, $4,000 to work with them for like 6 months, where we were coming in 2 or 3 times a week, and they were doing work with me in there, checking my form. We were getting our bodies scanned. Like, they were, had recommendations for us around nutrition, like all this sort of thing. Me and my wife did this together. It was like a hobby. And then they would also plan for us to go outside of our time. And I had a separate gym membership where I could go and do the stuff on the off days. And so there were some days that Abby had me working 5 days a week. So I was 2 days with her, 3 days on my own. And I did that. I did 2 6-month stints with Abby. And then she ended up moving. And I didn't want to go with a new trainer. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to start doing this on my own now. And I started doing some really serious weightlifting, which is what I've been doing pretty much since 2019 up until now. And, these aren't super impressive numbers or whatever, but I got my squat up to 325. I got my deadlift up into the mid 300s. Doing like 90-pound dumbbell chest presses, 90 pounds each hand. So I've gotten pretty serious about the weightlifting. Those are considered to be intermediate for my age and weight. Those are considered intermediate numbers. Those aren't even really all that impressive, to be honest. But I love it. And maybe the final thought I have on this, I'm going to turn it over to you maybe to close the episode out, Nate, is that Naval Ravikant has a great quote. He said, people say life is torture. I don't know if I agree with that. I'm kind of paraphrasing him. But the thing is to pick the torture that you love. Right. Nice. Or the best diet is the one that takes no willpower to stick to. The best workout plan is the one that takes no willpower to stick to. Do something that you love. The best job is to have one that doesn't require you to feel motivated to go into work every day. And I would just say that of all the phases I've gone through, I really love the one I'm currently in. There's some that I love more than others. I had a whole running phase too because of my best friend, which I'm not going to talk about. I hated it. I had like a 2 or 3 year running phase. I hate running. Anyway, I would just say that there's something about weightlifting I think that is very different. And here's my recommendation. If someone wanted to get started in this, I recommend starting strength.
Oh, yeah, you tell me about that.
Yes, I don't think there's a better way to get started. They're criticized for being overly simplistic, but that's, I think, actually really important for someone who wants to get started. And that company actually, a lot of their first-time clients are actually people who are 50 and older, 50s, 60s, 70s, who are actually doing it to maintain their health as they age. And I love the company's ethos because of that. Obviously, I started doing their stuff when I was at the tail end of my 30s. But the criticism that Starting Strength has about the gym industry is that a lot of times trainers, and I will say this, I love Abby, but but a lot of trainers are trained in such a way that they overcomplicate the things that they tell newbies to do, because it makes it feel as if it's really hard so that people continue to rely on the trainer. When in reality, almost anything you do getting started is actually going to give you huge boosts in energy, strength, that sort of thing. So that combined with the fact that, and I mean, this is a good segue for you. I will also do stair stepping. So I'll do, 100 stories in 25 minutes or something like that, where it's a pretty good clip.
That's your cardio.
Yeah, and I'll do that every once in a while. I used to do it a lot more, but I'm mostly just on the weights now, which weights, according to Starting Strength, if you're doing them right, they will provide the cardio as well. But anyway, so yeah, I'd recommend people look into Starting Strength. If you want a science-based channel that is not a lot of hype, I'd recommend on YouTube Jeff Nippard. He's a really good source of information. I think that's where I'll stop. I think that's where I'll stop. Turn it over to you. Maybe you can close that episode out, Nate, with
well, yeah, and I want to just say your numbers may be intermediate, but they're impressive to me, Daniel. That sounds like a lot. I am not doing weights. And I would say, my perspective on this is going to be rather than I have had gym phases, which is, it's cool the way you phrased that or framed it, but everything I've done exercise has been communal. Whenever I've tried to go solo quest on it, like that's why something like weightlifting would be really hard for me, because it feels I show up to a spin class 2 mornings a week and it's the same, collection of people. And if I don't show up, there'll be like this one guy and there's like, Nate, where were you? We missed you. That kind of thing is so important to me to get me to show up. I run the stairs with another close friend of mine and been doing it for 10 or 12 years, a few times a week. The fact that he's there to meet me at 6 a.m, that's essential to me. It's similar to your Abby. I've got to have an Abby, or I'm better off if I have 7 Abbies, to try to get me to show up. So all of my exercise, I've gone through different things that I'm interested in my body. Like I used to play when I first moved to New York as a jazz pianist. There was a great jazz musicians basketball pickup game, and I showed up religiously to that because I love b-ball, until my back and my knees just hurt too much, and then I switched to something else like spinning. I swam for a while, but again, swimming was too isolated. It felt too lonely to me, so I bailed on that. But so that's my thing on exercise. It's always been finding a group. It's always been showing up consistently to that group, mostly because I feel kind of accountable to them. I always say, I'll see you next Thursday, and then I show up. And then in terms of like, sort of the why behind physical exercise for me, I just, and this is probably a good, well, actually I wanted to say one other thing, but this is a good wrap up, which is that I'm a huge proponent of like, put your body first. Like as my 95-year-old neighbor around the corner here says, Nate, use it or lose it. And then sometimes she says, move it or lose it. And she's walking by my house twice a day because she goes on these laps. And so I just think as long as I'm moving my body, as long as I'm exercising consistently, then it really benefits the mental health piece. It benefits, honestly, it benefits so many other facets of my life, but how I present to my family, how I present to my colleagues. So that piece, I know, Daniel, one of the things I like about you when you share your schedule, it's like you head off to the gym after you've worked for like 3 or 4 hours.
It's true.
So you'll go there and you'll do that. And it's just it's still like intense and like goal focused the way that inspires you, the way you would operate in that context. But then you probably come back if you have to work more and you feel totally energized again. Or it's almost like it's almost like you're starting a second day, Yeah.
I'm in my early 40s. I feel amazing. I love having the energy. And just to talk about that mental health aspect again one more time, there are studies that have been shown that there are positive mental health outcomes for those who stay active. And I think even some that have been specifically on they've tied it to specific kinds of activity. But for me, there's something about doing the weights or whatever. I come back, it kind of clears you out. There's something about it. And maybe, I know I said I kind of had a final thought. I'm going to add one more final thought. And that is...
One more, and then that's truly a wrap.
Yeah, then that's truly a wrap. Is that I think this all wraps back around to the fact that, again, because for me, things are very, very scheduled, I've had time to educate myself about these things. Like, I've been able to taste a lot of things and try a lot of things and find things that work for me simply because since my time is used really, really efficiently, I have more time in my life to read that book or to listen to that podcast or
show up to your coach. You showed up to a gym where you needed a 6-month commitment.
Yes. So I'm having a hard time putting in the words, but I think it's just the idea of like, because I think it's all interconnected. And I think this is the way I'd say it. Because my brain isn't jumbled with a bunch of work stuff when I'm not working, I can truly be present when I'm doing this other stuff so that I actually do feel like I have the bandwidth in my life to add some of these other things that I've heard friends of mine say like, oh, I just don't have time to go to the gym. My life is crazy. It's always crazy. My life is crazy.
Yeah, totally.
Actually, no, it's just unorganized. That's actually the word you were looking for. And if you were to organize it, you'd find that you have the time to do these things. It just feels that way.
Yes.
And I'm not trying to be preachy here. I'm just saying that I know how helpful it's been for me to do all this. And I would wish this on anyone. Like, some people have commented like, Daniel, do you even enjoy life? Like, look how regimented it is. I was like, no, I'm enjoying life a lot. And I'm getting to do a lot of fun and cool things because the space is there to do it. So that's probably the way I'd end this, is just to say that I hope this doesn't sound too intense. It doesn't feel intense to me.
Right.
My days honestly feel pretty relaxed. Yeah, my days feel really relaxed, but it's just because I am.
I think that you just hit it on the head right there. Like, how does it actually feel to you as a listener? Like, what does your actual physical and mental health feel like to you? And then, like you said, if the job site, if your school is feeling crazy, then likely there's an opportunity to make some adjustments in some of your habits around your physical and mental, self-care process. And, the link you made to being efficient with your time, being organized, I want to link it back to an area that's so important to us, Daniel, which is around this idea of annual planning. Like, you don't know what to prioritize in your life if you're winging it day in, day out, day in, day out. The reason why, Daniel, I'd say, I'm going to just speak for you here right now. The reason why you can make those two lists is because you've actually done the thinking long before those lists were created around what were priorities for you. And this is what I'll close with, is that, like, in this year, one of my top priorities was my physical health. And I was linking it to one of my second priorities, which was my wife. And so we just completed like a 2-week-long walk that's called a through walk, the coast to coast across England, which was 200 miles in 14 days of walking. And it was intense for us physically, but it felt great to do. It didn't feel crazy. It didn't feel wild. It's something that we talked about doing a long time ago, and this was the year that we prioritized it. And so then a lot of my physical well-being was around just making sure that I could show up to that and do it in a, like I said, in a positive and peaceful way and have a lot of fun. To the outsider, they might, like you said, they'd be like, that's crazy. I can't believe you did that. Actually, to me, just like to you, all the things you're enjoying, Daniel, talking about, to me, it just felt like, no, but we set a goal of doing this. And it's something that Jess and I really, really enjoy doing is hiking together. We just extended into a 14-day walk, But I think that's the link for me, is like, do you know what your priorities are for the year? Like you said, do you know how work fits into that? But then equally important, and I would say more important, do you know how your physical and mental well-being are being served by that work, right? And how's that fitting into it, right?